All right, Michael, we're on. Good afternoon and welcome to the National Urban League Digital Career Success Series. Today you guys are in for a real treat for interviewing, the game changer for career success, which really is. Everyone can get a great resume together, a fabulous LinkedIn profile, and even network to their best. But it's the interview which is the make or break of your career. Today we have with us the infamous, as I call him, Michael Hyter, who is definitely an FOJ, a friend of Jody, and a mentor of mine, and has seen interviewing from all size, shapes, and colors in the work that he does, working with executives throughout all corporate America, nonprofits, Fortune 1000 companies, and places that you possibly are even working at today or might want to work at in another time in your career. He's going to make sure that you understand the ins and outs of what it truly takes to be a master at interviewing. You might even not want the job when you're done, but you want to make sure that you got it before you left. And you will know from what he tells us today what you truly need to do. I would like you guys to pay attention to what's on the screen. We are across the social media with the Urban League's Job Network. We are on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, even Instagram and YouTube, where you can find all of the past and future digital career success series that we have taped for you to catch up or to just spruce up your own career. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce the infamous Michael Hyter. I want to thank you for joining us today. I know you have a very busy schedule, and these guys on our line today are really in store for a treat. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to what you need to present, and there will be Q&A, so please start sending in your questions once they come in, and we will answer them all at the end. Michael?
Thank you, Jody.
No, thank you.
And it's an honor to be a part of this, and I'm also privileged to be called an FOJ from the Jody. It's amazing how you and I see each other for all these years, and we haven't aged a bit each. That's kind of cool. I wanted to, I guess, acknowledge that this presentation or the conversation is about sharing information that many times people don't tell others. You know, so this is sort of like a secret meeting where we're going to share the secrets that aren't typically shared with others to help us. And I guess before even getting into the interviewing conversation, I wanted to at least acknowledge to all of those who are on the line here that there is a talent shortage in spite of what people read about unemployment rates. There is a talent shortage. And even though there are a lot of job openings, there are a lot of positions that are left vacant because employers say they can't find qualified people with the skills or knowledge to fill those jobs. And these opportunities have risen over 130% since 2011. And so someone would say, well, given that it's been difficult for some of us to find a job, how could this be true? And a lot of it has to do with between being impressive enough to be hireable with people who have jobs, and that there are more people than you would realize who don't make a favorable, good impression when they're applying for the openings that exist, and as a result aren't hired and are frustrated. But I wanted to at least acknowledge that the marketplace is ripe for opportunities, especially if you are flexible, geographically flexible, and even interested in a variety of different things. So I just wanted to set that as a sort of as a stage for this conversation. And you're in the driver's seat more than you realize if you are looking for a job, but oftentimes the tips to assist just aren't shared to the degree that they should be, which is the reason for this meeting, and I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to at least share what I've learned over the years about what works and what doesn't work with all of you. It's just a real privilege to be able to do that. So there are three areas of focus that I really wanted to talk about today that I think will really make a difference. One is I want to talk about professional presence, what that is, what that means. Then I want to address the topic of perceptions matter, so that we are all sort of on the same page around the significance of what perceptions means. And then the third area is practical tips around interviewing and applying for jobs. And the targeted outcome here is for all of us on the phone to be even more competitive going forward as a result of the 40 minutes or so that we're spending on the line today than we were yesterday. And so that's my expectation. That's what I want to talk about. And so let's start with professional presence. And rather than get into the meat of this first, I want to give you an opportunity to answer a question. So there's a polling question that should be shown shortly. So can we make that, can we pull the polling question up, please? And
yes, hold on just a minute, Mike.
Okay. So the polling questions on the screen, we're going to give you about 25 seconds at the most to pick your answer, and then after all of the answers have been selected, we'll tabulate them and see what the majority of you said. So if you would take a moment, what is professional presence? Appearance, communication, behavior, attitude, or all of the above?
All right, Michael, did you want me to give you the results?
Yes, please. The results,
okay.
Drum roll.
Okay, so we have 96% of those who voted number E, all of the above.
Okay. You said 96%?
Yep.
That is awesome. It basically means that 96% of the population are all A students. Because all of the above is the right answer. Oftentimes, when professional presence is referenced, there is a perception that exclusively what one looks like is the entirety of what professional presence means. And as defined here, professional presence is about owning and conveying your image in all of those facets, and how you project confidence as well as confidence in order to mobilize someone to make a decision about you positively is what professional presence means. You know, I have a lot of times where I'll interview a young person who is really interested in employment with an organization that I work for or that I manage. And oftentimes they will have an outstanding resume. They may even have a really nice professional attire and suit for a man or a business suit for a lady. And yet their ability to convey confidence or the ability to convince me that they are confident enough in themselves in order for me to be interested is significantly weak, because they haven't been counseled on the fact that it's beyond just what you look like in terms of what you're wearing, but the kind of confidence that you convey. Let's see, I'm trying to advance this here. My slide isn't advancing. Are you seeing the slide?
Or is he not the presenter?
Well, there we go.
Mike, you are the presenter? Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't advancing.
Okay.
But what I didn't mention at the beginning is that for those of you who are listening, there's a couple of assignments that I'd like to respectfully ask of you after this session is ended. And what I have in front of you is a professional presence checklist where I'm strongly encouraging all of us to seek a person, preferably someone who's in a professional situation, an executive or manager of an organization, it doesn't matter, but someone that you know that would be honest with you and literally ask them some of these questions, or ask yourself some of these questions. So, do you believe that you can lead or learn to lead other people? Is a question I'd like you to self-reflect on. Or do you hold yourself in positive self-regard? But I would ask others, how is your professional presence to them? Do you come across confident? Is there areas of opportunity for improvement relative to your appearance? Are you someone that comes across as open to feedback? I think it's just very important to take a moment to inquire from others who have an impression about you, how your professional presence shows up for them, as opposed to just assuming how it shows up for you is the only litmus test, because oftentimes we may not be in touch with some areas of opportunity because we haven't asked that question. And I just don't want to dilute the importance that professional presence has when you show up for interviews, and it's beyond just physical appearance. So that was the message with respect to that one focus area. I know we're going to leave some time for questions to go into more depth later on, so I'll move on. The second factor that I talked about, I guess before I go to there, so I just wanted to just reinforce in closing with respect to professional presence, believing you have what it takes to add value, or believing you have what it takes to make a difference for the organization you're interviewing for is huge. Because in comparison to someone who feels and expresses and presents themselves this way, in comparison to someone else who doesn't really know what they have to offer or aren't real sure, they just want a job. The person who exudes that they believe they have what it takes to make a difference in their organization is always going to be preferred to the top of the line for consideration than someone who doesn't exude that when they interview with someone else. I just think that's important to sort of note. Perceptions. Now this is probably the most misunderstood item there is in terms of interviewing. And I wanted to just focus on this because think of perception, the accurate definition of perceptions is it is someone's impression of you. In other words, it's someone else's impression of you, not your perception of yourself. And so I always state that the perception of other people is much more important than our perception of ourselves, especially as it relates to interviewing and looking for a job. And that is sometimes difficult for some people to understand because oftentimes when one is interviewing for a job, I'm looking for a job and it's real important that I want to impress upon this person, but I am oblivious to how that person is perceiving me because it's all about my needs when I'm meeting with someone in an interview. And it's just really important that you understand that decisions to advance us when we interview for a job has as much to do with that person's perception of us when we're interviewing, in addition to the materials that they may have in front of them or whatever references that created the opportunity for us to meet them. Because too many times when we focus on our own needs, it hurts us more than a lot of times we realize. And, you know, it's also important, although I'm probably stating the obvious to everybody here, we make decisions or impressions about whether we are impressed or unimpressed with a person within seconds of meeting them before we even have a chance to get to know them. And that same thing occurs when you're interviewing for a job. That interviewer's perception of you can make a determination about whether they even hear what you have to say when they ask questions. So if I perceive you to be low energy, someone who isn't prepared, or you don't have questions, then I've already decided that you may not be a fit for the organization, even if you have more experience than everyone else that has met with me before you. So that's just really important. Our perceptions is really a critical element to this interviewing thing. And so assignment number 2 that I'm asking, if you engage a person or two who's in a professional situation and you talk about your professional presence and how that may appear to that particular person or those people, this perceptions matter checklist is something that I would strongly encourage you to think about in terms of answering for yourselves, as well as asking others. So, you know, I would strongly say, you know, how do you perceive yourself, or how do you want to be perceived? That's a really important question. And then ask the question of some people that you trust, how do they perceive you? I can give you a recent example. It's not interviewing related, but even with the organization that I manage, and I have a sense that I want to be perceived as a good manager, and I want to be perceived as someone who's committed to the development of others. That's important to me. But I took a moment to just ask some of the individuals that work for me that I trust, who would be honest with me, and how am I being perceived by the people that work with you privately? You know, this is just between us. How am I perceived? And I was amazed that their impression was I'm perceived as harsh, perceived as high standards with low empathy, and unapproachable, which blew my mind, because that wasn't how I wanted to be perceived. But because I received that information from a credible reference, I adjusted, because now I had a sense of how I was coming across to others who were making judgments about me versus how I was thinking about myself in my mind. And so, you know, you should ask people that you respect, how are you perceived? You know, what are you doing that shapes how people perceive you? Are you seen as adding value or maintaining status quo? As simple as these questions sound, I think it's just real important to take the time to invest in figuring these things out before you actually start embarking on a really heavy interviewing or job search, because that knowledge about how you're perceived by others will fundamentally make an increased difference in how you come across in terms of perceptions and professional presence. And it's also important to have people who will tell you the truth about what you're doing that will increase your level of success. With all due respect, and I'm speaking for myself too, family members aren't necessarily the best resources because they don't have a sense of what you might be trying to do professionally. I would strongly encourage you to seek the input of people who sort of represent being in the environment that you're aspiring to be in, as opposed to people that you are personally friends with, who primarily only see you as the person that they like as a friend, as opposed to somebody they may be perceived in trying to hire. So it's really important to act on that. So professional presence is important. but understanding the perceptions of others about yourself is equally important. As a matter of fact, it's critical. So getting to the meat of what this meeting was about, I want to talk about practical tips that will help you maximize your ability to identify your next career move or to successfully interview for jobs that you're interested in. On this slide that's on the screen here, there's a lot of research that's been done to sort of identify what are the top sources for hires. In other words, what is the source for the most quality hires that organizations have identified that gives them access to quality people versus just quantity of hires. So on this grid here, it's intended to show that the most important source for quality hires tends to be social professional networks. That has become the game changer these days in comparison to the word of mouth 10, 15 years ago. Employee referrals are also a very, very high, predictable resource for quality hires for companies. That's not to suggest that these other things aren't important, but I just think it's important as we think about competing for employment in this particular life cycle in our economy, really being in touch with the social professional networks angle. I'll go into that in more detail in a minute. Is a really, really key tool that's accessible to all of us that we just need to learn to leverage more effectively. A strong online presence is critical these days. It's critical. And if you don't have an online presence, I strongly suggest that you create one, because that will allow you to actively manage your personal brand, because everyone who's interested in meeting you will have access to that if you do that properly. And I continue to be surprised at the number of people who are looking for employment who have a minimal online presence, or who are on LinkedIn but aren't active, or who don't leverage the technology that's available to them to get access to information prior to an interview. So I just really want to emphasize the stress that an online presence is critical. Your personal brand are these three things. Your differentiator, what do you want to be known for? What impression do you want to make? And what mix of strengths and skills do you bring to an organization? Those things, especially the first bullet and the third bullet, are critical, but they are often missing in interviews. Sometimes when I'm interviewing people, it isn't clear what they're known for in their mind. It isn't clear what they want to be known for in terms of contribution. It isn't clear what their strengths and skills are that I ought to value when I'm considering them. They're just looking for a job. And so it's just important that you recognize that when you're interviewing, be congruent with what do you want to be known for and what are your strengths and skills that would add significant value to the organization you're interviewing for, because that would be extremely impressive to an interviewer, because it doesn't happen as often as it should. So maximizing the power of your social media to promote your brand, these are some tips here. By using Twitter and LinkedIn in particular, to let people know you're looking. If you have a network of relationships, even in Facebook, where you have relationships with people, letting people know that you're looking can significantly expand the number of word-of-mouth referrals, because you have access to people regardless of where they happen to live in the world through these mediums, who could be sourcing what's going on in the market on your behalf. I would strongly suggest also joining industry tracks on Twitter. There are a lot of organizations or industries that have Twitter accounts that allow you the opportunity to participate in what's going on in the consumer product industry or what's going on in the aerospace and defense industry. where you have access to information that's being shared there. Another thing that is new, that is really, really effective, is company text job alerts. I know Career Builder has it, but if there's a specific company that you're interested in applying to, go online and see, do they have listings of job openings on their website, or do they have the capability of you signing up to receive text alerts when job opportunities exist? When I think about the Career Builder link that I highly recommend that you go to, there is a way of signing up for on there where you can identify areas in the country, specific jobs of interest, and you can sign up to receive text messages about specific jobs that fit the criteria that you signed up for, that gives you sort of a heads up in advance of something that's become open that very few people fully take advantage of. If you're scheduled for an interview and you know the name of the person that you're interviewing for, I would strongly suggest going online to get as much information about that person as you can find. Oftentimes they're on LinkedIn. So you have some sense of their background and their experiences, which would increase your rapport capabilities when you talk to that person, because you're familiar with them more than just meeting them for the first time. And the other thing that I think is a relatively new concept is this hyperlink concept for resumes, which are often now sent to people electronically. I still strongly, and I'll talk about this in more detail in a second, but I still strongly recommend that on your resumes you speak about your accomplishments versus just the things that you've done. But oftentimes there are things that you may have done that's a matter of record, or some presentation that you made at one point, or some website that you created that goes into more detail than you would have time to sort of explain on a resume, because you want the resume to be no more than no more than 2 pages at the most. Hyperlinking on the resume, where I could click and get access to more information about that specific accomplishment that you made, or picture of you receiving that award that you spoke about, would be really, really impressive to someone who's reviewing your resume after they've spent some time interviewing with you. So I would strongly encourage you to sort of explore, if you have more to tell than you have room on your resume, to consider hyperlink. Not a lot, but on occasion, to sort of reinforce a point that you want an employer to consider when they're thinking about you and your brand. So for resumes, your LinkedIn profile is real important. So, you complete a LinkedIn profile, the resume should flow that same way. I just want to reemphasize, this is about summarizing the roles that you've played with companies and your accomplishments. Not just your roles. Your accomplishments tells whoever reads the resume that you're about outcomes. I would highlight any significant leadership roles, regardless of whether they were paid or not. And if there are any gaps in your journey, to make sure that you provide an explanation. So if there's a 3-year gap because you served in the military, or there was an illness and you were out of circulation for a couple of years or so, explaining the gap as opposed to the gap just laying there would help me make that linkage around why that gap exists when I'm looking at your resume. But I just really want to make sure quantifying your successes whenever that's possible. When you worked at an XYZ company, this was your accomplishment, and it resulted in an increase in sales by X%, or resulted in decreasing expenses by Y%. It's something that you can quantify. It's extremely impressive, and it's often missing on resumes. The things to avoid, and I know I'm stating the obvious here, but avoid writing the War and Peace version of your background. The biographical narratives that read like a novel. Succinct, bullet point accomplishments as opposed to long paragraphs about everything that you've ever done in your life. Be really, really conscious that you aren't repeating information. That's very annoying to an employer when they see the same thing mentioned 2 or 3 times in exactly the same way it's written. If you only use the most senior titles that you've ever had, and you don't show progression, that's a missed opportunity, because what is impressive is how you've grown to a certain level, as opposed to just only the senior titles that you've ever done. Do not omit details, because that's obvious when someone is looking at a resume and they see these gaps, as I referenced earlier. And then the one thing that is a certainty towards being taken off the top of the pile to the bottom of the pile is, what I call these errors in grammar. Misspellings, horrible formats. Again, that reinforces a positive or negative impression or perception. And I am amazed, even in this day and age, in 2016, how often errors in spelling and format still exist on documents people are sending to employers asking to be considered seriously for employment. So that's why I just mentioned, please avoid that at all costs, even if you have to review it 3 times and have someone else proof it for you before you consider it finished. That's really, really important. I don't know if maybe some of you probably saw this online, but I just wanted to sort of acknowledge this one example as sort of the epitome of what I'm talking about in terms of impressing people. There was this young lady by the name of Nina Muffley, who is Middle Eastern. She transferred to the United States. Nina had been applying for Airbnb for weeks because she really wanted to work there, and she hadn't been receiving any responses. So what Nina did was she thought about, rather than giving up, what could she do differently that would help increase the probability of having a shot at interviewing with someone at Airbnb. And so what she did was she created an online marketing plan that she sent specifically online to Airbnb, and this marketing document about herself sort of goes into, she sort of paints a picture of the distinction between someone who really is making herself more competitive in comparison to the average talent. And I'm going to try to do something here that I hope will work if I'm online. And if it doesn't work, yeah. So this is her cell, but she did this online where she listed what Airbnb is about based on her research. She then listed what what's missing in specific markets with Airbnb, because she took it upon herself to research to see where they were underrepresented, and based on her familiarity with the Middle East, listed specific information to talk about why Airbnb penetration in the Middle East is low. And then she talked about why it matters, and she gave examples around where the areas of opportunity. Then she even went so far as to say that if you had a business hub, as a result of a business hub in the Middle East, these are some places to consider starting, where she talked about Dubai. And she just literally spelled this out in a very succinct but impressive format, where she was, these weren't long biographical narratives. And then she just talked about that, they could move into Dubai today if they did these things, and that there were partnership opportunities. There were regional events that took place that Airbnb could take advantage of. And then she just basically said why I'm doing this and why I love Airbnb, why I belong there. And she just sent it to them, literally. She just took a chance, and just went about her business to make this happen. And ironically, what happened was she, I'm afraid this might happen.
It's okay.
There we go. We're good. She received an inquiry from the CEO and the Chief Marketing Officer from Airbnb in response to this. They arranged for her to have an interview with a marketing recruiter, and they hired her, and now she works there. Now, that's an extreme, but what this bill illustrates is a person who really took the time to research an organization and to speak to what she uniquely brought to the table and how it fit with her perception of what that organization needed that could add value as a way of presenting her candidacy. And as a result, she catapulted to the top of the line in comparison to everyone else and is now working there. So I just wanted to give you that example of the distinction between someone who's just applying versus someone who really went, the extra mile of trying to impress upon what her value could be to get the attention of the interviewer when they made the decision to spend some time with her. So as it relates to the interview, which is the essence of this conversation, there's one last polling question that I just wanted to pose just for your participation here. The poll is now open. It's coming. The question coming.
It's up, Michael.
Good. So I'd like everybody to take a few seconds to look at those 5 answers. A retained recruiter versus a contingency recruiter, which statements are true? Take a chance on an answer, and we'll summarize them in a few seconds. Okay, are we ready to summarize?
All right, Michael. I took a few more seconds because people were still voting.
Okay.
It seems like, oh, wow, they're still voting.
Okay.
All right, so it's about 42%. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and state it. Hello?
Oh, I didn't.
Hello?
I hear you now.
Okay, so about 42% voted all of the above. 20% chose the third choice, a retained recruiter operates exclusively.
Okay.
15% chose employers only pay a retainer firm if a candidate is hired. And 12% voted for contingency recruiters charge the employer an upfront fee. And about 10% chose most C-suite positions are filled using contingency firms.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you all for your participation.
You should see the results.
I'm sorry?
You should see the results right there on your screen. Do you see that?
No.
Oh, okay.
I don't. But that's okay.
Okay.
I mean, I took the results as you shared them with me.
Okay.
The correct answer is C. So a retained recruiter operates exclusively with whoever they're representing. Contingency recruiters only charge the employer when a candidate is hired. That's the correct. So A is incorrectly stated here. Employees don't pay. They pay, employers pay a retainer firm an upfront fee in the beginning. Most C-suite positions are filled by returning firms. So most C-suite, like chief marketing officer, chief executive officer, chief financial officer. So it's just really important to know the distinction between the two, because oftentimes that isn't real clear to people. And so, and I say that because ever since I started working for Korn Ferry, I've even had some friends and relatives of mine send me resumes saying, can Korn Ferry help me out? And reality is, for the search business that I happen to manage, we primarily only work at the C-suite level with Fortune 500 companies. So if you're just starting out in your career, Korn Ferry isn't set up to help you out. But there are some what I call contingency organizations that do help people find jobs in given markets. But a lot of times they'll charge a fee or have the employer pay them once they place someone. So it's just important to know the difference between the two. Professional recruiters are, there are benefits to working with one, though, because it allows you to have a long-term partner or access to opportunities that you may not have access to on job boards. They tend to have information on hiring trends and access to interviewing tips and techniques. But I wanted to state, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of access to information through social media these days, through LinkedIn and other means, that gives you access to information more than you tend to realize, where professional recruiters aren't necessarily required when you're looking at an employment opportunity if you aren't at the C-suite level. Some of the things that I would strongly encourage the listeners to avoid, though, is don't look at a recruiter as a vehicle to fix your career management issues. If you're not happy in a job, don't look for a recruiter to be the solution. Don't over-communicate, which is code for bug a recruiter becoming an annoyance, or being desperate and really overly self-focused, and not researching whether a recruiter is focused on your industry or not. But using Korn Ferry, just the company I happen to represent, we do have an arm of our organization called Future Step, FUTURESTEP. And if you go online, Future Step is a part of our search business that actually places people at the director and entry-level vice president level. And oftentimes we will list on our website job openings that we are being hired to fill that would give you access to information that if there's anything that appeals to you, there would be a means for you to be able to submit your information and your resume in response so that you are part of the information that they're pulling together and looking for people for these particular companies. So I would strongly recommend people, if they're interested, that that's another vehicle for getting access to where opportunities are by using a recruiter. The bottom line is that these trends in interviewing and best practices, panel interviews are becoming very, very popular, where people are being scheduled to meet with multiple people at the same time. So that could happen on occasion because it gives an organization an opportunity to meet one person by having 3 people meet them at the same time. I just think it's important that if you're in that situation, building rapport, being real careful, watching your body language. You don't want to be slouching in the seat or looking at the floor and not sort of being positive in terms of engaging. Ask meaningful questions, because panels are very, very judgmental if you don't have questions to ask. But by all means, be prepared. The other thing that is also becoming more popular is virtual interviews, because because of the virtual nature of conversations and the fact that people can be in any city in any country and still meet someone face to face by using Skype or other video conferencing technology. So for those of you who aren't, I strongly suggest you get comfortable with video conferencing. But if you are in a video conferencing situation, make eye contact with the camera instead of making eye contact with the screen, so that the person on the other side feels that you're looking at them as opposed to looking at their desk. It's really important to watch your facial expression, be positive and exude positivity, as opposed to just being low-key and monotone. When the interview is over, please don't forget to disconnect. I can tell you it's really interesting when the interview is over and I'm hearing a person speak to how they felt about the interview because they didn't realize that the phone hadn't disconnected yet. That's a no-no. And you can anticipate technical delays because they happen on occasion, or technical glitches. But those two things are real important things to consider when you are faced with panel interviews or virtual interviews. The final thoughts, though, here are, I just want you to think boldly about your future as opposed to having others do that for you. Leverage your network, both through social media as well as people who work in other organizations. That has the highest probability of helping you than you just sending things out cold, resumes and information out cold to people you don't know. It's important to build your personal brand online, as I mentioned, because that's the marketing element that anyone has access to that would give them an insight about whether you're impressive or not. Actively manage your career. Be deliberate about what you want and what you want to work towards versus just assuming things are going to work themselves out on its own. And shape your outcomes when you can, rather than waiting on other people to shape it for you. If you have an interest in working in XYZ organization like Nina did, what can you do to help shape the increased opportunity for that outcome to happen versus just accepting that unless it falls in your lap, it's not going to work. Those things are really, really important as you think about how to increase your competitiveness in the interviewing cycle when looking for jobs. And I hope that everything that's been shared relative to professional presence, perceptions, as well as these practical tips around interviewing and positioning yourself competitively, you found useful with the time that we spent today. And now I'll turn it over to the moderator to open it up to whatever questions that came up during our presentation.
Excellent, Michael. As always, I took lots of tips, not that I'm interviewing anytime soon, but you never know when you're interviewing. So all these tips can work on an elevator, when you're just walking around your office, when you're out and about, even on vacation. You never know who you're going to meet. So a lot of your tips were excellent. There were some questions that came up that I think, you know, some are semi-generic and others make a lot of sense. One, you talked about having to make sure these days you need to have a social media presence. And so how much time should they spend, and where do you think the best time professionally is spent in social media to really ramp up your presence there? If it's not, you know, if people feel that they don't have enough, where should they be spending their time?
I would thank you for the question. I would say the strongest foundation for that that's universally applied throughout the world is LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is basically the professional version of Facebook, without the personal pictures of, you know, the barbecue in one's backyard kind of thing, because it's very professionally oriented. And there's a LinkedIn profile that allows people to sort of list what they've done and their accomplishments. There are other elements within LinkedIn that allow you to have access to helping to increase the probability that your background would be reviewed by certain people. But because LinkedIn is so universally the first place any business person would tend to go in anticipation of meeting someone, it's important to look at their LinkedIn profile, complete it, and then update it accordingly versus leaving it and having an old one, you know, a year-old information on there when you're looking for a job today, for example. So I'd say LinkedIn is the one where your information being current around your accomplishments, you know, hyperlinks for things that you've written or things that you've done, areas of interest, things that you are reviewing naturally, because that gives you access, that gives other people access to you. And the biggest problem that has occurred, in my judgment, Jody, in response to that question, has been failure to maintain the LinkedIn presence or failure to maintain the LinkedIn, your LinkedIn resume so that it's current. But the more that you do that, then the more access that you, even some people who have access to you that you may not even know about, it increases the probability of that happening if you keep that up to date.
Yeah, totally agree. There is, for everyone on the line too, there is a great, within LinkedIn, there is a link that will show you that you really only have to spend 9 minutes a day to keep your LinkedIn profile current and active. And, you know, as Michael was alluding to, and if you go back to one of our previous winter DCSS presentations, we really talked about all the different areas that you need to spruce up to make sure your LinkedIn profile is up to date. So, Michael, the other question is, everyone.
Hey, Jody,
yes?
Jody, just one more quick thing that I wanted to just make sure. Two quick things in response to that. For LinkedIn, your updated LinkedIn profile also influences the algorithm, where when you click onto jobs or careers and you put geographical interests, a lot of times the jobs that will surface are related to your LinkedIn profile, that there's algorithms that will sort of identify things that are comparable to things that you've done that a lot of people don't realize. And so as your presence, as your profile is current, that makes that more effective. The other thing that I just wanted to make sure that I stated before we went to the next question, I'm encouraging everybody to make their Facebook pages private. Okay, I want to say it again. Make Facebook pages private. So employers don't need to see personal pics of people standing with red cups. And I'm telling you, we do look for that because it gives us insights of people. And you'd be amazed when people aren't conscious of that, all of the stuff that people have access to online, it gives us a three-dimensional picture of a person. So I just want to make sure that everyone knows your Facebook should be private.
And, you know, I love you for your conservativeness. I think we all need to hear that a little bit more. But you led me right into one of the other questions, which was really about how to really use these keywords. A lot of folks had complained in their questions that, you know, they're on a bunch of listservs. Even myself, I do corporate social responsibility, which is CSR, but that also can be customer service rep. And so often I'll get stuff where they think I want to be a secretary, but I'm like, well, have you looked at my resume because I got 3 masters? So where do you really highlight those keywords? And then, you know, other folks also, like what you were saying about the algorithm, they might want, they're in Chicago, but they're getting jobs from all other cities, states, and even outside of the country. So how do you control that when people are searching? I also just think people should be open to move depending on your situation. Sometimes the opportunity is not under your nose. So kind of so the keywords, the algorithm, and then when you're really searching, you know, what do you really have?
That's a great question. Let me start by saying the primary value of the jobs link is your access to information that you are controlling the access to versus it automatically coming after, reaching out to you. So you go on that link, you click on that particular tab, and you specifically would put keywords, and oftentimes you may have to experiment with them. So you say, well, I want to be a sales manager, and you put sales manager in there, and it gives you, you know, geographical preferences. You click on that, so you can specifically say, I'm only interested in the metropolitan Washington, D.C. market and sales management. Let me click and see what shows up. No, I don't like that. Let me alter the word a little and try it again. Or let me see. And sometimes people will even go onto Google and try to identify the different types of words that support a job that they're specifically interested in, just to have some sense of what other keywords there are to use. But the way this thing works is so fast that you can alter words just to experiment. And if administrative assistant positions come up, then there's something in what you've listed in a keyword that triggered that. But I'm just fascinated by that. But if you are if you've been a diversity manager for 5 or 6 years, and even if you specifically ask for job opportunities in Chicago and Boston, a lot of the diversity type opportunities will surface at various levels because it's been influenced a lot by your background or by the
industry.
The industry. But the other thing that I guess in closing too that I should have stated from the beginning is the things that drive the algorithm is more driven by the recommendation, not recommendations, the, what's the word I'm looking for? You know, when you constantly have this opportunity to endorse someone,
yes,
and you're endorsing them.
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
It's endorsements and recommendations on
endorsements,
Facebook.
yeah, but endorsements in particular where I'm endorsing that Jody has outstanding executive coaching skills or Jody has outstanding X. You know, you have a chance to click, and then that accumulates. And then what happens is the list of skills that you've been endorsed, as those endorsements increase in quantity, it informs the system of jobs that are similar to what those skills need when you're looking for jobs in given markets. So it's driven by that.
Well, you know, we are just running short for time, but there's a few more questions clearly that will always come up, and I would invite you all to try to connect with the infamous Michael Hyter on LinkedIn. Your profile better be up to snuff before you reach out to him. Let him know that you heard him here on the Digital Career Success Series. I'm hoping that we might be honored enough if he's available to join us for the career fair this August in Baltimore, since it's not too far.
Oh,
and if you are for phenomenal jobs, Korn Ferry is the place. So he's working at a place where you guys might see some jobs you really want. So I would also urge you to go there. And if nothing else, one of my actual books that I tell my own clients that I coach to look for is his book, which is The Power of Choice, Embracing Efficacy to Drive Your Career. The tips in there go well beyond what you heard today. This was just a snippet. And Michael's ending our winter Digital Career Success Series today, kind of bringing all of these skills to a close. But I want you guys to continue to join us starting in April. We are going beyond your resume, beyond all these tools, all the soft skills that you need. So you already have LinkedIn take care of, you already have your resume up to snuff, you have enough networking, and Michael has told you not only if you're live, if you're digital, if you're virtual, if you're a panel, no matter what interview you have, you are ready. But what is it that you really have to show up with? Taking Michael's advice and really bringing it to life. Your brand, you know, are you putting your Facebook private? Are you, doing all the right things in your industry? How do you become an influencer and make influencers like Michael and others? And so we'll be bringing you Denise Hamilton, who's the CEO and founder of Watch Her Work. Her focus has been on but she works with a whole bunch of people ahead of time, so you guys might want to read her article in the Network Journal and the most recent online as well as in the magazine. And we look forward, Michael, hopefully to seeing you come back again, and maybe, like I said, at our career fair live and in person. You were one of our popular sessions this series around, and we'll see if you hold up to snuff when Denise comes. So I just want to thank you for these tips, the advice. I know you're on the road, and I want to thank everyone for joining us and the National Urban League for putting this together through their Urban League Jobs Network, and to remind you all to please upload your own resume, because the Urban League Jobs Network, those jobs on there, they are looking for you. No matter what city, state, and or country you're trying to go to, they are trying to hire you. So thanks again, and we look forward to the next time.
Thank you so much. Michael. It was a pleasure. See you soon. Bye.